Hi, Dr. Nunez. Today I'll be going over narcolepsy and how it pertains to our class Foundations of Brain and Behavior. Today we'll be going over narcolepsy, what it is, different signs and symptoms, how it's diagnosed, what some treatments are, the prevalence of the disease, and its prognosis. Narcolepsy can be classified as a neurological sleep disorder that affects the way the brain is able to control its sleep and wake cycles. This means that a person with narcolepsy has trouble staying awake and falling asleep and staying asleep. To fully understand what narcolepsy is, you need to know that it's a lifelong disease with no known cure, and it can severely affect your quality of life if it goes untreated. According to the Italian Neurological Society, it's a rare condition that only affects about 1 out of every 2,000 people. But if you think about the population of the United States, there's a lot of people that suffer from narcolepsy, and it's important to learn about. A couple of the symptoms can include daytime drowsiness and sleep attacks. This means that you have bouts of irresistible sleepiness that are hard to bite away. You can also have hypnagogic hallucinations, as well as sleep paralysis and cataplexy, which is the temporary loss of muscle control. We got onto this topic a little bit on the previous slide, but some of the symptoms of narcolepsy include significant daytime sleepiness, cataplexy, hallucinations, and sleep paralysis. Something important to know about daytime sleepiness is that you don't just feel tired. It feels almost impossible not to fall asleep, even if you're doing something important like playing a sport or even driving a car or giving an oral presentation. These bouts of sleepiness or sleep attacks can cause people to fall asleep doing almost any activity, which can endanger themselves and others. Cataplexy is where you have a loss of muscle tone. This means your muscles go limp. This can happen just facially, or it can happen to your entire body. Usually this is brought on by a bout of excitement. Say your sports team just won the game and you're cheering them on. All of a sudden you could be collapsed on the ground. Hallucinations usually occur right before you fall asleep and can seem so real that you think that they've happened. Sleep paralysis is also a symptom of narcolepsy. This is where part of the brain is still asleep when you're awake and you're unable to move your body parts even though you're cognitively aware of your surroundings. To further explain the symptoms of narcolepsy, why they happen, and how they happen, you have to understand the idea of poorly regulated rapid eye movement, or REM. This means, well, think about it this way. Think of a regular sleep cycle. First you go from stage 1 into stage 2, into stage 3, into stage 4, back to 3, 2, then REM, then back to 4, and so on. Someone with narcolepsy has poorly regulated REM stages, so they could fall asleep and then 5 minutes later their brain is all of a sudden crashed into REM sleep, and this is what causes these hypnagogic hallucinations and vivid dreams that we've mentioned. Also, the research talks about different signs, and an early warning sign of narcolepsy is just excessive drowsiness during the daytime. You might not even be experiencing the sleep attacks yet or any of the other symptoms, and in children this is usually the most common red flag to get yourself tested for narcolepsy. Many people are unaware, but there's actually two different types of narcolepsy. Type 1 is narcolepsy with daytime sleepiness, sleep attacks, along with cataplexy. And then type 2 is the excessive daytime sleepiness, but no cataplexy. Type 1 is believed to be caused by an autoimmune disorder, where our white blood cells attack the body's neurotransmitters called orexin. Orexin is responsible for keeping the body awake. Therefore, it explains why someone might have a hard time staying awake during various tasks. As for the causes of type 2, we really have no idea. Scientists are still doing a lot of research to figure out how there can be daytime sleepiness bouts and still be tired after adequate sleep during the day and even naps during the day. So stay tuned for that. Next, I feel like we really needed to dive into cataplexy and understand what it is. Cataplexy is a medical condition in which strong emotion or laughter causes a person to suffer sudden physical collapse though remaining conscious. Without much warning, this person can lose muscle tone and have a slack jaw, broken speech, buckled knees, or total weakness in their face, arms, legs, and torso. The episode can last up to a minute or two, and the person is awake and completely aware of what's happening. I just always like to imagine what that would feel like to not be able. It sounds a lot like sleep paralysis, but it doesn't happen, it's not brought upon by sleep. In understanding the physicalities of sleep paralysis, I found this little diagram really helpful because there can be partial cataplexy, where it only happens in your face or upper body or lower body, or it can be the complete full effect. Like when you're having partial cataplexy, you might be able to move your arms or fingers, but not your legs, or you might be able to move your whole lower body, but not your face. Something I neglected to mention about the causes of narcolepsy when we were talking about the different types is that while scientists believe that the depletion of the brain called orexin is found in most people with narcolepsy, they have no idea how or why the blood cells are attacking it. They believe that there must be some kind of gene mutation that makes the orexin or hypocretin seem like a bacterium or a disease in which the blood cells feel threatened by it and feel like they need to get rid of it in order to keep the body healthy. But that's just the current running theory. Here we have a sagittal view of the brain, and with narcolepsy, where all the action happens is actually in the midbrain. It has to do with the hypothalamus and the pituitary glands. So as you can see here with the wake systems and hypocretin orexin, it shows you a map of how the hypothalamus, the pons, and the medulla work together to distribute the orexin throughout the brain to keep the other systems and the other cortexes awake. The depletion of orexin or hypocretin causes the brain to stay awake less effectively. And one of the current running theories that scientists have on why this is because of changes in a gene known as the T cell receptor gene, which is a specialized immune cell that plays a role in the immune system responses. This causes the genetic predisposition to develop this disorder. And what's interesting, however, is that through a lot of case studies and research, they found that heritability of narcolepsy is only about 10%, and usually if a parent or a grandparent has narcolepsy, it's not that likely that the child will also develop it. So it's really important to discuss the prevalence of diseases, especially ones that can affect your life so greatly like narcolepsy, because you need to know your risk and what all the symptoms that can come with it are. So, as we said earlier, it's estimated to affect 1 in 2,000 people, but the exact number of people with narcolepsy in the United States is unknown, especially because it's hard to diagnose and many general practitioners are not aware of the signs and symptoms of the disorder. So, onset of narcolepsy can happen anytime, but most of the time it happens between early childhood and 50 years of age, but the peak period happens between 15 and 36 years of age. So the nature and the severity of the symptoms can vary, but usually what happens is there are times of high intensity and then times when your symptoms of narcolepsy level out. But it seems to get worse with time, even though this is not a progressive disorder. In other words, you will not decline any further than your highest intensity peaks, most likely. The diagnosis of narcolepsy outside of a sleep clinic is actually quite tricky. This is because general practitioners and hospital staff are not adequately trained on how to detect the early warning flags of narcolepsy, according to the Italian Neurological Society. Two of the main tests are an overnight polysomnogram followed by a multiple sleep latency test. Another way that you can test for narcolepsy is tapping into cerebral spinal fluid. In this fluid, you can test for levels of hypocretin or orexin, and if those levels are low, narcolepsy is likely. The program would be conducted in a clinical setting, so you would probably go to a sleep clinic and sleep there overnight. They would connect a bunch of electrodes to you. You would have something measuring your airflow through your nostrils. You would have a monitor around your chest that would help regulate and check your heart rate. You would have a bunch of electrodes on your arms and legs to detect movement, and you would have electrodes on your brain to detect brainwave changes and eye movements. This helps track REM sleep, as well as if you're completely still during sleep, or if you're having trouble in parts of your brain where basically you act out your dreams. The MSLT, or multiple sleep latency test, measures how quickly someone falls asleep. Think about for a nap. Usually most people nap for about 2 hours during the day. And if you have 4 or 5 opportunities to nap during the day, and in each of those you're having a period of REM sleep, that would be abnormal, and a diagnosis of narcolepsy is very possible. When people are diagnosed with narcolepsy, it's usually a very scary time because not a lot of people are well educated on the subject and don't fully know how it's going to impact their lives, their loved ones, and their ability to enjoy things and be a functioning member of society. But the good news is that people who seek treatment for their narcolepsy symptoms usually live full and happy lives, and they're able to achieve whatever they want to. They may still have some drowsiness and some cataplexy, but it's usually very manageable with medication. Possible impacts, if you don't get any treatment, are decreased ability to thrive and achieve in a work or school setting, withdrawal from friends and society, and isolation and depression. So people that don't get treated for their narcolepsy symptoms, usually those symptoms intensify, and it keeps you from hanging out, and basically you spend most of your time in and out of a sleep stage, which can be very sad and, I suppose, very depressing. So, as I mentioned on the previous slide, there are treatments for narcolepsy, even though there is no known cure. Medicines and medications may help alleviate certain symptoms, and therapy, including stimulants, can help treat daytime sleepiness. Another treatment that doctors often recommend is keeping a sleep journal. This can ensure you're tracking all of your naps and the times you wake up during the night, as well as any hypnagogic hallucinations or cataplexy events that you might endure. This can help your doctor by seeing if you need to change your medication or up the dosage in order to best handle your treatment. Orexin is used to treat cataplexy, which also helps improve sleep at night. As I mentioned before, people with narcolepsy often have trouble staying asleep during the night as well as daytime sleepiness. Sleep paralysis and hallucinations may be treated with certain antidepressants, believe it or not, because it has to do with the SSRIs and the reuptake inhibitors that are involved with antidepressants, but that's an entire different story. Also, developing a regular bedtime routine is really useful to help staying asleep and help decrease sleep attacks during the day. Additionally, regular exercise is recommended. And here we have our lovely reference page. This is where I got all my information from. I'm sorry that there aren't hanging indents. I could not for the life of me figure out how to do that. But that's the end. I hope you learned something, but you probably didn't because you're my professor and you already know all of this. But have a great day, Dr. Nunez.